The year is 2026. The United States, already divided by politics and distrust, finally begins to tear apart. What starts as a war of words quickly turns into something much deeper. Governors stop obeying federal directives. National Guard units refuse to take Washington's calls. Then, one by one, the systems that kept the nation alive begin to fail. Power grids shut down. Supply chains freeze. Military installations close their gates and answer only to local leaders. Within weeks, the most powerful country on earth fractures into rival territories. Now, survival depends on three things: fuel, food, and geography. From this chaos, two great alliances take shape almost on instinct. The first calls itself the Federal Coalition, stretching from the Pacific coast through the Great Lakes and into the Northeast. States like California, Washington, Oregon, New York, Pennsylvania, and Illinois unite under the idea of preserving the old federal system. Together, they hold most of America's economy: tech giants, ports, and finance. Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and the country's biggest defense companies all remain under their control. But their strength is built on fragile foundations: imported energy, sprawling supply lines, and a grid that can collapse with a single strike. The second power rises from the interior, the Continental Alliance, with Texas at its heart. Joined by Oklahoma, Louisiana, Missouri, Kentucky, the Carolinas, Florida, and much of the Midwest, this coalition commands nearly all domestic oil and a majority of the nation's farmland. They might lack the high-tech industries of the coasts, but they control the essentials: fuel and food. In a long conflict, that might be all that matters. Alaska takes the chance to stand alone, declaring independence, while Hawaii chooses neutrality, far removed from the mainland turmoil. Two Americas now exist, and both believe they're the legitimate one. Before a single missile is launched, geography already decides who has the upper hand. The Continental Alliance inherits the Army's backbone. Fort Hood, Fort Benning, and Eglin Air Force Base fall inside their borders. Texas also gains Fort Bliss on the New Mexico line, giving them a direct path to heavy armor, bombers, and helicopters now loyal to local command. The Federal Coalition holds the seas, keeping control of San Diego, Norfolk, and the Atlantic and Pacific fleets. California alone hosts several carrier groups, but their escorts are scattered and dependent on constant refueling. The coalition still owns cyberspace and the stars above. The NSA's nerve center in Maryland, Space Command in Colorado, and the infrastructure that connects satellites to the modern world. This war won't begin with who fires first. It will be won by whoever can keep running after everything breaks. In the East, the old heartland of America becomes the front. North Carolina and Virginia erupt overnight into battle zones. At Fort Bragg, a division splits apart. The 82nd Airborne divides between loyalty to Washington and allegiance to the new Continental Command. Armored convoys move up the I-95 toward Washington and Philadelphia, racing to secure the industrial corridor before it can fully mobilize. But cities grind everything to a halt. Each overpass becomes a kill zone. Tanks can't maneuver through neighborhoods. Drones patrol the skies, turning entire suburbs into no-go zones of fire and smoke. Further inland, the Mississippi and Ohio rivers draw the battle lines. Continental troops push east from Missouri and Texas, trying to cross into Illinois and Ohio to seize the rail hubs and farmlands that keep the federal side alive. Bridges are destroyed, and barges are sunk on purpose to prevent supplies from reaching the enemy. Illinois and Ohio dig in, fortifying every crossing they can. Out west, California sends its Marines and mountain units to defend the Colorado River, the artery that provides power and water to the entire coast. The Hoover Dam becomes a fortress, its survival meaning the difference between light and darkness for millions. Continental forces push north from Texas and Utah, aiming to seize the river corridor and choke the coast's energy supply. But every mile is uphill, literally. The mountains turn each advance into a brutal grind. The real battle, though, isn't on the front lines. It's in the fuel lines. Texas and Louisiana control most of America's refining capacity, producing the gasoline and jet fuel that keeps planes and ships in the air. Once those pipelines shut down, the coalition's air wings and fleets begin rationing. Jet fuel becomes a new form of currency. The federal side still has a few refineries on the West Coast, but not enough to replace Gulf output. Imports from Alaska and Canada offer some relief, but every shipment is a target for continental missiles. Next comes food. The interior holds the grain belt, Kansas, Nebraska, and the Dakotas, massive producers of wheat, corn, and soy. Yet the federal side isn't empty-handed. Illinois, Ohio, and the Great Lakes still grow plenty, while California's Central Valley remains one of the most productive agricultural regions on the planet. But food itself isn't the problem. Movement is. With trains halted, rivers under fire, and fuel scarce, crops rot before reaching the cities. Supermarkets run dry not from famine, but from collapse in logistics. Then there's power. The United States grid was always divided into three regions: East, West, and Texas. Once coordination breaks, the lights start to go out. The Northeast faces rolling blackouts. California and the Northwest rely on hydro and solar, but winter power demands quickly outstrip production. Even nuclear plants begin to fail without spare parts or stable cooling systems. Within half a year, blackout zones spread through major cities. Meanwhile, the war expands into cyberspace. The federal coalition retains Fort Meade and Cyber Command, but the South has its own army of private engineers, people who once worked on the same systems. Cyber attacks slam hospitals, rail networks, and power grids. When satellites fail, communication falls back to shortwave radios and whatever fiber lines still function. Before long, the internet itself divides. The federal states build a network called Bluet. The continental states create LoneNet. For the first time, Americans can't access the same web, or even the same reality. Each side creates its own truth, and information becomes the most dangerous weapon of all. And then, there are the civilians. Over 400 million firearms already exist across the country. In rural states, ownership rates climb above 70%. Millions of armed citizens, many veterans, hunters, or trained shooters, form local militias overnight. In the federal territories, cities have fewer guns per capita, but still millions overall. The problem isn't weapons, but organization. Without command, those militias risk causing chaos instead of defending their communities. By the second year, neither alliance is truly winning, just enduring. The Continental Alliance keeps its tanks running and planes flying, fueled by its oil and fed by its farmlands. Cities survive under strict rationing. The federal coalition still has superior technology, but its power grid is weak, and blackouts sweep through Chicago, Boston, and Los Angeles. Supply lines choke. The Mississippi River becomes a modern iron curtain dividing the two nations. In the cold months, the lack of fuel freezes progress entirely. By late 2028, both sides are cannibalizing what's left. Broken vehicles are stripped for parts to keep others alive. Mechanics and engineers become more valuable than soldiers. The war is no longer fought by infantry, but by those who can keep the machines running. By mid-2029, the struggle reaches its breaking point. Three futures appear on the horizon. The first and most likely, the Continental Alliance endures long enough to win. Its control of oil, crops, and raw materials slowly starves the coastal states into submission. The nation reunites under new terms, its capital somewhere inland, likely Dallas. The second outcome, a federal resurgence. Northern and western states reopen trade through Canada and the Pacific, and a coordinated cyber strike cripples southern refineries. With no fuel, the continental war machine grinds to a halt, forcing a new reunification under a revised constitution. The third possibility: total collapse. Both sides break down. Governments dissolve. Militias carve territories out of the wreckage, and outside powers step in to restore stability. But that's a story for another time. For now, the question remains: what happens when the world's greatest superpower turns its strength inward? When the enemy isn't across the ocean, but across the river? Sometimes the fall of an empire doesn't come from invasion. It comes from itself.